Combine Akira Toriyama's art style in diet form with a discount chivalry medieval warfare, toss in a bit of razzle-dazzle magic, and lastly turn it into a MOBA format with full hero skill, spell, and ultimate choices, and you get Warlander, a game by Toy Logic, the same makers of Happy Wars, if you remember that game. So howdy and welcome to Worst MOBA Ever, where I explore and review MOBAs that push the limits of both your computer and your sanity, so you don't have to. Join me on the quest to uncover the absolute worst one, and if you enjoy MOBA related content, consider giving me a thumbs up, subscribing for more, and slapping this bell for future updates. The game ended up having me clock around 10 hours in the first 2 days, as it always seemed to have something around the next corner to keep me entertained, and I'm going in with a disclaimer that this game is as loosely a MOBA as I'm willing to review, but it ticks just enough boxes. So getting into the game, we're treated to a very stylish introduction about the lore of the game, and I don't even skip it. It got my attention and kept it. Check it out.
Skullheims, oases where miraculous aura coalesces. Should the people make their thoughts as one, whatever they imagine, the aura shall make it so, granting blessings in times of desperation, providing the people with the...
I also noticed if you just sit here, it plays other lore videos, which are just as nice, but there's 2 secret ones you can only access this way, it seems. I assume they're secret because they seem to be the same grayed out ones shown here in the cutscene section of the options that you can watch, and you can't click them. I wonder why. I'm not sure what's going on in this one, but that's probably why it's not viewable normally. Oh, Japan, you sweet summer child. So once we're loaded in, I'm giving a bunch of random garbage. I have no clue what any of this stuff does, so thanks, I think. Then I get hit with 6 unskippable advertisements for their store and upgrades. I haven't even played the game yet, and they're already trying to sell me stuff. Oh boy, and also there's this guy. I have no clue what he's so happy about. Once I'm done being hosed down by the studio with ads like the little dirty consumer I am, I get to start the tutorial. And what's this? A tutorial we can actually skip. This pleases me, but for the sake of the review, we can't skip it. It's a very short and efficient tutorial. You learn everything the game has to offer in under 5 minutes. It's about the best you can get out of a tutorial. The flavor of the game also starts to shine through here, as we get to see a wizard casting spells using literal finger guns. And I learn how to dance on top of Robert's body. Get f***ed, Robert. The game then decides afterwards that we're big boy warriors and ready for some actual combat, except with training wheels on our horses, as we get put into preliminary groupings of noob players. Acceptable, but a massive blow to my inflated ego. So there's a sort of waiting area where you can test the various features in the game and a few lobotomized peasants to test your abilities on, as well as the various siege and defense weapons you can mount. I like that this gives seasoned players a place to test builds, but also noobs can wander around like the little curious Georges they are. The queue times for these novice battles is around 1 minute, not bad for a game on its potential deathbed, but let's see how it plays. Getting in, I can't pick my stronger warrior because of a system that is similar to the new Star Wars Battlefront but slightly different, and arguably better due to the level of customization that the game offers, which makes a good time to explain the entire customization system. Essentially, the longer you fight, the more kills you get, and the more objectives you capture, you earn deployment points, which in turn allow you to spend them to use your more powerful characters until they die. The 5 slots down here are known as your deck, which consists of 5 characters you make yourself, and at least one of them has to be a tier 0 or titleless. The reason it needs to be titleless is that without a title, it only gets the minimum equipment points allowed for customization, thus it is a free cost to play, but also very weak. As you add different tiered titles, it raises your equipment limit to add more powerful gear, as well as rewarding a powerful passive sometimes. This in turn causes a unit to cost more on the battlefield. The lower title passives are rather weak, but getting into the higher cost titles, you start to get passives like this one that increases capture rate by 3 times the normal rate. At the highest tier title, you even get locked in incredibly powerful unique skills that can't be changed and are only attainable through these specific titles. These are all class specific. All the titles are also earned in a unique way. The requirement usually echo the specific buff that the title itself gives. Example case being the capture rate title that is earned by, of course, capturing points. This system thus far seems really well put together and has a lot of options for customizability. The equipment you can put on is separated into armor and skills and 2 weapon loadouts with more skills, as well as some talents here at the bottom. For a titleless character, you're very limited. You can also change the 3 classes into one of 2 armor types. The mage gets demolition or attack. Weirdly, however, for some reason, the warrior and the cleric get the same one. You'd think the devs would have given the cleric some form of utility boost to their second armor, like 2% cooldown or increased healing. Perhaps a little oversight on their part. To compound this lack of diversity, another potential oversight here seems to be a lack of weapon choice for the warrior and cleric. They're restricted to sword for the warrior and hammer for the cleric, and their other weapon choice of a ranged weapon is the same exact choice for both classes. As a matter of fact, this is sadly where the first issue crops up for the game. Looking at the release date for this game, 2022, September 12th, the developers haven't expanded on these classes nearly at all. Approaching 2 years, and as shown here, the cleric and the warrior are stuck with only one weapon choice outside of their overlapping ranged choices. Doing a little research, they have, however, added quite a few abilities since launch, so there is some hope for more content. But after a year, you would logically think for the game's health, they would have introduced a new class outside of warrior, mage, and cleric, as well as added multiple weapon choices for the warrior and cleric. A potential reason for the lack of content may be their current contract with Square Enix to develop and maintain a game you may have heard of called Foam Stars. In their defense, this is a very lucrative deal to take on, as Square Enix is quite the company to try and impress, but it appears to be at the cost of Warlander's content. With Foam Stars finally released, hopefully for the sake of the game, Toy Logic starts to put a bit more love and care into Warlander, as so far it's done nothing but impress me. And the community seems to be incredibly kind, talkative, and very active. It would be a massive loss here for them to not expand on this game with a big update to bring in thousands of new players. Despite not adding weapons and a new class though, they have somehow managed to add cosmetics to the game where you can customize your hair, face, skin tone, and many other aspects of the character. With a better understanding of our loadouts and character though, let's head back into our baby's first battlefield. It appears to be 5 squads versus another 5 squads, 20 versus 20, almost like an expanded version of a standard 5v5 MOBA. You've got an order from left to right, essentially support, carry, jungler, and support. This of course doesn't mean any squad is limited to doing any specific task, as you can go and do anything you want during the battle. This simply determines how you will earn the most rewards for the battle, so you definitely want to make sure these things happen. I decide to start my first match as a mage, and I'll let the start of this battle speak for itself.
Together, I'll help.
Witness this beautiful glory of what the beginning of a match looks like. AoE buffs where you join in to make the buff stronger or last longer with a synchronized singing chorus. This game's charm shines through greatly here. As a new player, I'm just speechless and enjoying all of this. I have no clue what's even happening. Another issue though immediately crops up, and I want to point out this does not diminish my enjoyment of everything I experience in this match, but it is something to note for new players. Since we're in a baby boy lobby, most of the players are bots. If a player doesn't have a Steam, Xbox, or PS logo next to their name, they're most likely a bot. They're about as useful as a wet paper bag, sadly, and oftentimes will just be lambs to the slaughter. I also noticed they seem to be programmed to aggregate to where the most kills are happening, probably some kind of safety measure to prevent a massive push of players. However, since they are so awful, responding appropriately to a massive push just serves to amplify their usefulness as a living fuel for the pushing lane that knows what they're doing. This results in a massive power imbalance between the two teams and quickly allows a player to gain an alarming high amount of Valor points, which are not deployment points. You see, the system is very convoluted, but it works, so follow as best you can. Valor points are an underlying point system that determines how many deployment points are earned. It's essentially your score. Every 1k points will get you some deployment points, incrementing even more after every 1k and until 5k, which it caps at just giving 120 deployment points. You also just earn sad pity deployment points by existing, and the amount depends on the length of the match in the core's remaining health. Okay, that about sums it up. Trust me, it just works as far as I can tell. I don't have any gripes with the system. Moving back to the game, as we are the assault squad, me and the other real player in my squad turn our focus to the bottom, where we take the first point and engage in a short battle that causes us to lose our first point. Also, randomly, there's this cute little animation for going near a ledge. It stops players from walking off. It's super unnecessary, but I love it, and again, shows how charming this game is. After losing the first point, we engage in a long drawn-out battle on the bridge where we're able to hold the line and mow down the enemy thanks to these handy turrets up top. Die, you red scum. After making short work of the enemy, we take back our point and begin the assault, only to quickly be shut down again and lose our point. At this point, it just becomes a huge back and forth at bottom, neither side being able to fully make the play to push each other completely. All while this is happening, our mid lane pushes deep into the core and manages to strike some damage onto it, as once the timer runs out, the team with the least amount of damage wins. This feels a lot like the typical MOBA format. It's not super common for every lane to win, but rather either break even, lose, or win. And the fourth rare one of worse than losing, they just completely feed like 0 and 10, but we don't talk about that. We broke even at bot and top, but pushed hard and won in the middle, and I feel if I chose to ignore my role and yeehaw cowboy all over the map, we would have genuinely lost the bottom lane and they would have made it into our core through bottom. It's hard to tell, but I felt I made a difference, and that was a good feeling as a new player just duking it out and holding the line down there against other players. Afterwards, there's a TF2 style victory scene where the enemy is forced to run with no weapons out, whimpering like the inferior gamers they are. As well as some enemies are strung up on these poles during the celebration. This is hilarious and I love every bit of it. I dance on this guy until he quits and it's the most satisfying. Call me toxic, I don't care. This is hilarious. That being said, let's get into the meat and potatoes of where this game suffers the most, despite how charming and fun it was for me. After another training big boy match, I play a few more, ranking myself up, and eventually run into an issue that seems to be prevalent in most of the negative Steam reviews. It's hard to win against a group, which is nothing new in MOBA games. Being the solo Andy against a 5-stack has never been fun, but somehow in a huge battlefield, the game manages to make it near impossible to anybody but a seasoned player. This is only exacerbated by a lack of players, so if the game was more popular, it's entirely possible this wouldn't be an issue any more than it would in any other Battlefield style games. So I won't knock the game for this, but it is worth pointing out. I managed to get a lot of good plays burning ladders and unleashing hell onto the squad below me 9 times out of 10 and had fun as a mage, but I can see where this would be the equivalent of punching a brick wall for less ranged utility characters like Warrior or Cleric. So keep this in mind when playing Warlander and consider getting a full group to tackle the game. But consider playing a mage if you're solo, as the utility and range gives you a lot of options versus a group. That being said, when I finally did manage to get an even game, I was absolutely outclassed by a lot of characters, oftentimes being one-tapped by a player with good talents and probably a maxed weapon. This wasn't fun, but it didn't stop me from continuing to play. As I mentioned before, being a mage made the game very approachable. I feel as if I was a new warrior, I would have just gotten outplayed by other warriors or completely annihilated by mages. I think playing a cleric and being safe and providing utility to the team would have been a good option as well. So that is something to consider if you can't keep up early on combat-wise until you get some better gear. As most competitive players will tell you, not many people complain about having a heal bot and keeping them full HP and CCing the enemy. A cleric will probably be most welcome on most squads. Lastly, I did however fail to mention 2 interesting things before we wrap up this review. One of them being the alternate game mode that pits 5 teams against each other on a map. It plays the same, except each team gets a relatively good sized base, and the commanders can even form alliances with each other to take another down. This seems to be where all the Gosu players congregated, and I was completely outclassed here. This game mode also seems to only be 1 or 2 going at a time, and it's on a timer. You have to wait X amount of time to join one. This was one of the funner games despite how overwhelmed I was during my matches. I highly recommend giving this mode a try with the full squad. You will probably lose, but the 5 teams constantly at each other's throat, there's a lot of room to make mistakes and just have a lot of chaotic fun here. The second thing worth mentioning as we wrap this up was the sheer destruction this game lets you do on the battlefield. It's beyond epic. It seems that if something is made of wood, you can most definitely destroy it, which made playing a burning mage of death all the more enjoyable. You can also set these turrets on fire, and the player is forced to eventually repair it once it breaks. There's really nothing they can do about it. Also, outside of burning and destroying everything, there's one massive destructive game-changing feature called Cataclysms, which I saved for last because I think they're the most awesome thing in this game. So there's a cataclysmic idol that will spawn on the map at a set time, which works like a flag a player can grab and take to begin casting at a location. And holy shit, this thing like it'll spawn a massive tornado that sucks up everything, or a meteor storm to rain down hell on the enemies, or a gigantic robot mech that multiple players can ride on with turrets on it. You heard me right. This game is wild for this. It spawns at a location dependent on where the map is currently pushed to, as to give an even chance, as far as I could tell, to both sides. However, once a team got it, it was theirs to use, and the other team could only break it at that point, where the enemy dropped it. I'm not exactly sure how it worked, as it was hard to interact with this specific feature, but it seemed to serve as a game-ending mechanic. It was possibly one of the coolest objectives I have ever seen in a game. This alone is a feature worth playing long enough to witness or use. I highly recommend trying to experience it at least once. That being said, I think I've just about touched on everything Warlander has to offer. Overall, my experience with Warlanders was addictive and fun. I haven't played a game as much as I have Warlander in quite a while. However, I can sympathize with most of the negative reviews, as they're not exactly wrong, but they're not quite right, as I myself didn't find as much of a problem with the concerns they voiced. Of course, I did give the game a lot more of a chance than they did. So if you enjoy MOBAs like Smite, Predecessor, or Gigantic and want to try an addictive, large-scale version of them on an open battlefield, Warlander comes as close to the experience as I can recommend. I do, however, hope that the developers don't abandon the game and give their community another class, expand subclasses a bit more, and add more equipment. It cannot be one of these. They owe it to their community to get a big patch out that adds all of these things at once. They have a potential gold mine if they can bring in more players, as most of the negative reviews are quite literally just full of complaints that would be solved with a larger player base. So as far as the episode goes, Warlander is nowhere near the worst MOBA, even if you can call it a MOBA. And the title still belongs to Ninja Village Battle 2. I don't think we're going to find a worse game than that, but that one's definitely the worst one we've reviewed so far. So with that being said, I give Warlanders a out of 10. And if you're new to the channel, let me say every game I review, I like to see how the game was meant to be played. So on March 23rd at 12 p.m. CST, let's all jump into some Warlanders and have some fun. Also, make sure to join the Discord for all the dates we set up to play these games and see a full calendar. Anyways, I'll see you guys all there, and on that final note, I say thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.